Hello there, my name is Pat Grosse, the Community Entrepreneur, and today I wish to present to you Grow Your Business Networks Exponentially with Community Development Principles. Okay, here's a quick scenario and I'm sure you will recognize it. Do you know somebody who's been to 2, 3, 4, 5 network meetings and decided to call it a day? Their avatar's not in the room, their market's not in the room, their audience is not in the room. People are not listening to them. They can't sell any of their products. Then you have the network facilitator who comes along and says, well, no, because you're not doing it right. It's not about coming and trying to sell your goods or services. It's about coming here to develop know, like and trust. And eventually somebody will connect with you and there you go. The question is, who's right? You may be surprised by my response. Let me tell you quickly about my experience when it comes to networking. I was a conference organizer back in the UK and I found it quite easy to get speakers for workshops and for keynotes because I used to go through other people's networks. Ding. And what was even more interesting about my job was that we were trailblazers. We were the market leader in training a whole new a whole new genre of employee, and it was called the European Liaison Officer. And we trained European officers across multiple sectors at the same time. And what we did is we had one program and then we moved to the next one. So the training courses were these people going from one to the next, and so they were meeting each other at these training courses, and they were creating a network. And interestingly enough, they then progressed in their jobs, and they became senior because it was a young career sort of pathway. And as they become seniors, they were then sending their staff to our programs. And what we actually ended up doing was generating two networks that we could access. And I call that the bi-generation network because there was two generations of the same field. And that came in very useful to me when I started the next job and I needed policies, procedures and processes urgently for a training fund that we were setting up. And it was that's what I call my £10 million network, because that's the size of the training fund at the time, equivalent to about $25 million at the time. This is 20 odd years ago, and so you can see how much was at stake there. And I was able to access those networks, and that saved my skin and saved the skin of the project. And then since coming to Australia, in my job, which was where I was able to build the capability of the organisations we funded, I was working in a government position. I was able to tap into nationally funded communities of practice projects. So I was building communities of practice, and I'll explain that as we go through, because some of these networks are in fact communities of practice, and they are two different animals. And since leaving my position in government for the last 12 years, I have become a community development specialist. And that's why I'm bringing to you today community development principles that can help you to grow your networks exponentially. I can't go any further into this presentation without first doing a shout out for the business marketplace, now the business marketplace global, because it has had a strong influence on my business. I joined the business marketplace in 2014. It might have been a bit earlier, but I knew I was there in 2014. And I had to travel 3 hours in the morning, first thing, to get there for a meeting that would start by 10 o'clock and finish at 3 o'clock, a full day. And at its peak, there were 100 people in the room. And each of us had a chance to do a 60-second pitch, the elevator pitch, that would be done in batches. There would be a 20-minute break that would allow people to have those conversations and swap business cards. And then you would go to the next session. And again, another group would be doing their 60-second pitches. It truly became a family, for me anyway, because I showed up, we all showed up consistently. We got to know people over time, even people that we would not be doing any business with, but we got to know what they did, and that was great because then we could refer people to them. But even today, it may be that I haven't spoken to somebody for 2 or 3 years, and if they were to ring me or to email me, I would have no hesitancy. I would be returning their calls or answering their messages. So it's interesting that consistency is important whether you go into a network or a community, whether you're part of it. You do develop over time a family environment. And if you can be part of a network that does that, I'm not talking about a clique, I'm talking about a family environment. So if you find one like that, it's valuable and stay with it. Okay, so let's go back to the scenario. And this is where it gets a little bit complicated because, first of all, the business colleague who walked away wasn't entirely in the wrong. They were correct to some degree. How they approached what they were doing might have been the problem. You see, as I will explain later, a network is basic. The true purpose of a network meeting is to get in there, work the room, gather the business information, and then follow up afterwards. The business marketplace example I gave you was exactly what a network is. The problem may have been, through the lack of understanding, that the colleague perhaps did not gather those business cards. How many times have you been online in a networking meeting and you've had to put your information in the chat space and then you've done nothing with it? There are some people out there who diligently will call you and arrange for a one-on-one. They are doing the right thing. They are playing the game. So you should be playing the game. Go to a network meeting, gather the information and do the work afterwards, because networks do not require a high level of trust whatsoever. And I'll explain that later. With respect to the network facilitator, what they're describing is something beyond the network. And once they understand that, then they will be able to see why there's a disconnect. Let me explain further in 5 community development principles to grow your business network exponentially. Let me start with a clearer explanation of why I was talking about a network. Let's start with Himmelman's collaboration for a change. This is where this all comes from. It's not coming out of my head. Okay, first of all, we're talking about networking. And networking, as I explained, there's no high level of trust required. It's about basic information exchange, and to some degree that means just exchanging business cards. The next level on the collaboration for a change, or the networking continuum, whichever way you want to call it, is coordinating. And a perfect example of this is when businesses in a town, say chemists, a series of chemists, and there's an opportunity for late night opening. Obviously they don't all want to do that and they're not competing at the same time. They get together and they coordinate. One will do late night one day, another day, etc., etc. And so what happens there is that they're coordinating their business activities to the benefit of their community or marketplace. So maybe you're thinking about, how can I work with my competition in such a way that between us we actually service the bigger good, the greater good. Okay, the third level is cooperating. And this is where economies of scale comes in, that you might have a staff shortage or you may need to share that position. And that's a good good way of looking at how can we cooperate, how can we work together. I worked in projects working on shared services. So they were buying through economies of scale, they had access to software that they could buy because there were multiples buying them at the same time. So that's an example of how you can work together to solve a problem that benefits you all as a business. And then the fourth level on this continuum is collaborating. I come across that all the time when I'm in the grant space. It's the partnerships where two different businesses come together to create a new project where they're collaborating on their different skills levels to create a bigger outcome, a new venture altogether. So this is the networking continuum, and this explains to that level of why networking is just that basic level. You do not give up any of your turf, but as you go up that continuum, yes, you are giving away some of your turf, so to speak. Now, this is where many networks are in fact communities of practice. I came across this work and the work of Etienne Wenger when I was actually leading communities of practice with my the organisations that we funded, and we brought them together because their community of practice was all around education and training, and how they were sharing information between each other, and also at the same time they were solving a few problems between them. Isn't that what we're doing when we're educating in the middle of a networking event? They're coming together. Communities of practice have been going for since time immemorial, but the whole concept has been put together since the 1990s in relation to how it works in the business environment, starting with Etienne Wenger's work with Boeing and how they would bring all their tradespeople together to create new designs and etc. I enjoyed reading all about that and learning. So a community of practice has got a shared domain of interest, which is business, so it could be marketing or it could be whatever. It builds a community, which is what these network leaders are trying to do. And there's learning through practice. So the exchange of information, those education segments, etc., are helping to build the whole ecosystem around the community of practice, because you can learn from what other people are doing, but you can learn by exchanging your experiences on certain problems. Now, communities of practice have also got sort of a system to go through. You come together potential, then you start thinking, how is this going to work? You become active, and then at some point in the future you disperse and it becomes just a memory. But I had to put that in there because many of the networks that I've come across have been in fact communities of practice, and that's a good thing. Are you part of a network that's bridging or bonding? What do I mean by that? Well, you have those networks or groupings, shall we say, I've got to be careful now on the wording, those groupings that get together and they're just working for the common good, the greater good in them, but they're not actually reaching out and they're not bringing in new experiences. They're there to strengthen the people who are already there, and I can think of one particular business network where that's very strong on that principle, but unless you start to get new blood in, you can easily stagnate. Or do you want to cross the bridge? Now, when it comes to the bridge, what we mean there is quite, as we just have alluded to you, is you cross the bridge to bring in new ideas, bring in new people. And there are some networks out there who are doing actually a pretty good job of it. One of them, an international network I can think of, the Happy Neighbourhood Project. They have got groups all over the world, and you cannot go to any of their meetings without finding somebody from one of the other HMP groupings out there. So they're very much bridging, and as I say, even in Australia you'll find in those groups people from America, Canada, etc., etc. So what kind of group do you want to belong to? Do you want to belong to a group that is really building that capability from within? Or do you really want to go out there and savour the world? Principle 4, this is one of my favourites, and it's to practice the 6 degrees of separation. Did you know that we are all connected through no more than 5 intermediaries, and that means across the world? Anybody on the planet can be connected through 5 people. I remember actually experiencing this when I was at a conference, and we just found out that the new director of a TAFE college near where I lived had been appointed, and we wanted to know who he was. So we got his name, but we had no idea because he came from the other side of the country, and we were thinking, okay, so who knows him? And what we did in the room is we looked around, found somebody from the TAFE system, and within 2 connections we knew everything we needed to know about this person. So you can do that as well. If you want to reach out to somebody, the way to use your networks is to find somebody who could then connect with somebody else, and within no time at all, how can you get to that person you're looking for? Remember, you only need 5 people at most. And the final principle is to create a collaboration chart. And a collaboration chart is like a mind map. You have your business in the middle. In this case, it's an example of a startup. And around it, you put whatever it is that you're going to investigate. In this case, it's the businesses, the target market, and perhaps the organizations and businesses that can support your target market. In other words, perhaps they may be good referral partners. And what you need to do in your ecosphere is to list who these are, put them into your map, and then through a series of lines, starting with no line. In this case, there is no connection between the startup and the council that's got some really good advice for businesses. But as a startup, they're not aware of the council's expertise. Then there could be, for them, they've brought their previous clients with them, so they've got some strong relationships, and I call that strong startup clients. And they may be thinking about becoming a member of a business network, and therefore they've not quite developed a relationship yet, so they've got a dash line, and so on. So the stronger the line, the stronger the relationship. And then you start looking at, well, all of these players, what relationships do they have with each other? And so by the time you're finished, you've crafted a map, and on that map you can see how you might be able to build new relationships or build relationships through other people's networks. So this is what a collaboration chart can do. And the value of this collaboration chart you will identify 6 months later when you do the same exercise again, and you will notice the proliferation of new contacts, new businesses, new opportunities that come your way. So this is a community development principle which has got a fantastic opportunity here to help you to strategically look at and work out a plan to grow your networks exponentially. So here are the 5 principles again. Number 1, know how to utilize the networking continuum. Number 2, join a community of practice. You may already be a member, but it's good to identify that you are part of a community of practice. Number 3, figure out whether your network or your grouping is strong in bonding or whether it's strong in bridging. Number 4, practice 6 degrees of separation. Anybody on the planet can be reached if you use this principle. And number 5, create a collaboration chart and then map it again in 6 months and 12 months time, and you will see the difference you've made in growing your networks. So before I leave you, I just want to introduce you to the How to Negotiate Anything Business Building Toolkit. Networking is one unit in a series of 8 that will help you to build your business. All you have to do to get started is to book a 30-minute conversation with me. at the link on this page or email me direct, and let's get the journey started.